had noticed just like some pain in my right side, and didn't really think anything of it. I have a 1-year-old, so I thought maybe I'm just carrying him too much on one side, and that ache is just because I'm carrying him so much, and he's a big kid. And nothing, I really didn't think anything about it. And then down the line, I woke up a Saturday morning and I had this terrible pain in my stomach, and like a pain like I had never experienced. The way that I could best describe it was like having contractions, but not being pregnant. It was like a stomach ache that wasn't inside of my stomach, but more on the outside and like even tender to the touch. And then it progressively got worse again. And so then at that point, I was like, okay, maybe it's my appendix. So I'll go in to urgent care. They'll tell me, it's your appendix. You're going to have to go somewhere else. And so I got to urgent care, and urgent care said that they couldn't do anything for me since they didn't have any imaging. And they were like, just because you're so tender to the touch, you need to go right away to the emergency room. So I went to the emergency room. At the emergency room, my pain had kind of already subsided and just, went away on its own. They drew blood, and they took some imaging to see if it was my appendix. He scanned my appendix, did all the scans and everything came back normal. The only thing he did notice was that my red blood count was high, and it looked like my body was trying to fight off an infection. So he said that he wanted to do some more scans. When he did the scans at the emergency room, he noticed a black spot on my liver. And he said if I had ever been told anything about that before. And I said, no, I've never heard anything about it. And so then he said, well, I've also noticed some other things in your lungs. I want to look at that some more. So he took another image of my lungs, and that's when we found an innumerable amount of black spots on my lungs. So he said, I don't know anything about this. You seem fine now. Do you feel like you're okay to go home? And I said, yeah, I don't have any pain anymore. So I can go home. I'll be fine. We had moved to a different city. And so I didn't have a primary care doctor. So I reached out to whoever could see me the soonest. And so she recommended a biopsy. They biopsied the liver. And so she said, you're young, but we have to take a look at it closer because we can't see anything from what we've seen. Because they did CT scans before that, again, with IV contrast, and they couldn't identify anything from that. So they took the biopsy. It was taking much longer than I anticipated. So, I would call and I'd say, is there anything that you guys have heard back yet? And I didn't hear anything back. They said, if they've sent it to Mayo, they'll let you know. And I was never told it was sent to Mayo. Got to Mayo, Mayo came back and sent back the findings to my doctor. And so when I got the phone call, they said, we need to talk about your results some more. When can you come in? And that's when I knew when something was out of the normal. As soon as you get the diagnosis, that's the first thing you think of. My kids, I want to see them grow up. I want to, and so that was my first initial thought. And then I was like, okay, what's next? Like, what do we need to do? What are the next steps? I got the results probably within the week or so. I was connected with a doctor that was a transplant surgeon, so that they could look at my case and my liver to decide what was the best route. Out of all the things in the world, as best as fortunate as it could be, it was in a spot where they could do a resection. And so they went ahead, probably within the couple weeks of finding out the diagnosis, I was in getting surgery and getting that spot removed. So everything in my mind was moving really slowly, but medically it was very, very fast. And I was very fortunate that people were able to make things work so that I could get in there and get that out. So they did the resection. They weren't sure exactly what was happening with the nodules in my lungs. I saw a pulmonologist, talked to them. They said they weren't sure, just to keep an eye on it. It might be something from the Midwest, just because we can get infections in our lungs and not have any idea that those are there until we get imaging and things like that done. So then they also recommended a couple days after I had the resection to do a biopsy of a calcified nodule that I had in my lungs. So they said, I've never seen a nodule this big and calcified in someone's lungs. So they chose that one to do the biopsy on. They biopsied, everything came back negative on that one. But there's still an innumerable amount that are not calcified. But my route of treatment, because we were fortunate enough that we were able to remove it the way that we were able to with negative margins, has just been kind of the wait and watch. So I have scans every 3 months for the next 10 years, or not for the next 10 years, for the next 3 years. So every 3 months, make a trip up there, get some scans done, and then hear from my doctor, and then repeat again every 3 months. I had surgery in June, and I've always been kind of a person to be pretty active and take things. I mean, my doctors were like, you're recovering really well. Like, are you sure you're feeling well? And I said, yeah, I'm recovering fine. I feel fine. And so I think sometimes I take that for granted. And I've been feeling some pain. And, whenever you feel pain of anything, the first thing that comes to your mind is this associated with that? And that's been the hardest obstacle to overcome, is like the fear of like having it come back. The mind is a powerful thing, and I think the hardest thing I ran into was people telling me, oh no, you're going to be fine, you look fine and everything. And while I may look fine, there's still these things that could happen. Yes, I've had a liver resection, and yes, there's negative margins, but there's still the possibility that some weird kind of mutation can still happen. And it's something that we have to live with for the rest of our lives. Even after the 10-year mark, it can still happen again. It's a constant battle in your head, but having faith has really kind of helped, and develop a support system. Sometimes and that support system can be sometimes hard to stick with, because they will say, oh, you're going to be okay, nothing's going to happen, and it's hard because there's these things happening. Yeah. And while I appreciate you trying to be optimistic, it's just, we still need to come to terms that this is real life, and having faith, and just trusting in God or whoever you believe in has been just really helpful. Just kind of put it in their hands.